Welcome back to another episode of Protein Bros Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Jeff, and today we had two very awesome guests. It's episode number 181, Leo Cormier, as well as Ian Smith. Leo has actually been on episode number 156. If you want to go back to listen to his story, it's phenomenal. They are the proud owners of Recovery CBD. Ian Smith has also gained a lot of notoriety for his battle against the government during the COVID 2020 shutdown at his gym called Attilis Gym up in New Jersey. And so we get into a lot of the history of what happened there as far as at his gym in New Jersey during the COVID shutdown. But we also really talk about what's going on in the modern landscape of health and fitness. Ian is a part of a peptide and TRT clinic known as Summit Rejuvenation. And we talk about just kind of the efficacies of what's going on in the industry, what's going on with the FDA, what is legal, what isn't legal, what's gray, what's not as gray, what's the industry moving towards, and how are they going to pivot throughout all of this. And so another big thing I want to make sure I mention is what is safe and what is not safe, what they recommend, what they do not recommend. And so there's a lot of really great nuggets of information in here, whether you're a fan of CBD, peptides, TRT, any of these things. We get into really good depth into each of those topics. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. As always, appreciate you supporting. Please like, subscribe, share the podcast up, and do let us know what you think in the comments. So without any further ado, let's get into the episode. Peptides, tests.
Just like, how can we sell this?
TRT clinics.
How can we get in on this?
Well, it's not, I mean, like, it's not really about, it's just like, how does that work in that aspect? Because of the amount of our customers over the years, from as far back as I can remember, you know, it's like, well, you know, you can get this natural test booster over here, but, you know, based on where your test levels are, that you should go get some blood work done and let's see where you're actually at. And then it would make sense to either know if, like, hey, could you just try a natural test booster and see how that goes for you? Or do we really need to, like, get ahead of this and get, you know, to the source of the problem and see what we need to do there? And so it's just like, that's such a common occurrence within our stores. And, you know, I don't think it's slowing down. I don't think it's getting smaller.
No, it's definitely not.
You know?
There are now more hormone clinics than McDonald's.
Whoa, that's a crazy stat if that's
That's
true.
a crazy stat.
Is that worldwide or is that country?
That's probably good, though, for the
Definitely
country.
It is. I would argue that that's, I mean, it's better than having McDonald's.
No shit.
Well, for sure.
What do you,
But
so,
can you serve 10 billion injections?
Right. I can sure try.
so we, RFK Jr. just came out with the peptides that they are going to start testing, right?
Yep.
Can you give our listeners an idea of what that means? I think he put that out yesterday. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you know, the peptide, you know, peptides are not new. They are new to the, you know, the general public for the most part. And, you know, they started to gain a lot of traction, you know, in 2020 and especially 2021 and 2022. And then the FDA in 2023 very quietly moved 19 peptides. And these are the most researched 19 peptides for the most part. Some of the most researched peptides.
BP157,
TB500. All these peptides here, your MOTC, you know, your Samax, Salank, you know, GHKCU, all of these, you know, there are tons and tons of peptides. These are some of the most researched and positively researched. So a lot of these peptides have a really good safety profile. They have human trials. You know, there are some peptides out there that have no human data whatsoever. You know, so these are some of the most safest and most well-researched peptides. And in 2023, the FDA just very quietly moved them from what's called Category 1 or Classification 1 to Classification 2. So that effectively takes compounding pharmacies out of their scope of being able to produce those. So now people can no longer get them from a doctor. Doctors can't prescribe them, and people can't get them anymore. So it pushed them into the gray market. Yep, pushed them into the gray market. The gray market exploded as a result of it because people want this stuff. It works. It puts the average person in control of their health much more than traditional, you know, Western medicine or modern Western medicine has. So the gray market exploded, and it was an absolute disaster, and the FDA recognized that. So I think that this is a result of that, but also a recognition that this stuff is not going away.
Right.
So they tried to regulate this stuff. They wanted to regulate it more, and what they opened up was the gray market, which they're not able to control. Because no matter how many of these places they shut down, they just keep on popping back up. And you see that in other areas as well with supplementation and stuff like that as well. So so
it's kind of like steroids. I mean, steroids were legal till, I'm not comparing peptides to steroids, but they were legal until, what was it, 1992? And once they became illegal, it created the craziest gray market of all time. And that's when like the pro hormone
which
explosion
makes things
happened.
Unsafe. It's not making it safer.
It
clearly.
It doesn't. That's the thing is they try to come in and they try to regulate, and then they're not taking into account just free will. Like people are going to do this no matter what.
Right.
You know what I mean? And especially
it's like banning guns.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not going to work.
So I think RFK realized that, and I also think that RFK realizes the practicality and the benefit of their use as well. So I think it's a twofold approach. So he's
definitely using peptides and TRT.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
It's got to be on the tan one, that's for sure.
Which,
God damn, dude.
And he's advocated for TRT before, so it's good that we actually have somebody, who's advocating for at least having the discussions. Right. So in February, he went on Joe Rogan. He announced that 14 of those 19 were going to be looked at again, essentially. And then yesterday they announced.
So are they going to be FDA approved, or
they're going to move back to Category 1,
which
means first things they have to look at them. They're going to have an outside advisory panel look at these things. They're going to look at the safety protocols or the safety profiles for these things, and they're going to go and they're going to look kind of further into them. Right now they're only looking at 7, which is like BPC, and these are the ones again with the depth of research behind them to open that door. So think of it as like the first wave.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So overall it's a really good thing. It's a good thing because peptides are going to be recognized as mainstream medical care, and it puts it back into the hands of doctors and clinics, which it should be under. This is not a tub of protein.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
You have to
we
have
shouldn't
the
have
education
MLMs with people selling injections on Facebook.
That is fun, right? That's a fun thing.
And that's
there are soccer moms being
everyone's got a code.
Yeah.
No, it's like, dude, there's like soccer moms on my Facebook being like, yeah, guys, buy these peptides from me.
Right.
And then they're recommending dosages and stuff like that. And it's not the same thing as, hey, take 40 grams of protein. Like nobody's going to die if you say take 60 grams.
Exactly.
Exactly. Whereas some of this stuff, it is a lot. It's very powerful stuff. And, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know what you're doing, then you can run into some problems. You could you're definitely going to be wasting your money. Mm-hmm. But this is not a thing of protein. So it certainly should be under the care of doctors and not your soccer moms on Facebook.
When I see the government talking about these things, it always leads me to think, is this a pharmaceutical play where a pharmaceutical is going to basically try to turn it into Ozempic like they did with semaglutide? Is that where you could see it going, where eventually there's going to be pharmaceutical companies? There will be no more BPC 157. It'll be some random, drug name, and that's what BPC 157 will be. Is that the way that the peptide market you think could go, or is it going to be, because the reason I say that is because if there's money to be made, who wants to make it.
They want to.
Right.
So this is a bad thing for pharmaceutical companies for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is that you can't put a patent on a lot of this stuff because a lot of them are naturally occurring. Yes. Right. So they're amino acid chains versus, your pharmaceutical drugs, which are chemicals. They're not naturally occurring in the body. However, what they can do is they can start to create their own. Mm-hmm. But now you're looking at other things. So there will always be your BPC 157. There will always be your TB 500.
Right.
What the pharmaceutical companies might try to do is that's what they did with semaglutide at first.
Right. Throw Wegovy on it.
Yes.
Calling it tirzepatide.
But the bigger problem for them is that this disrupts their business model. The business model that we have in healthcare today is managed decline.
Right.
They want you on as many medicines for as long as possible. So it's first it's your Lexapro, and then it's your this, and then it's your that, and then you're on 7 different things. And that's not how peptides are going to work.
Right.
Peptides are improving your health overall. So yeah, you might be on them, but you're not going to be needing them for the rest of your life to function normally.
Right.
You're never reliant on them.
Yeah, and they're making you better. They're not just, patching you.
Not a Band-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. So that is disruptive, but they will absolutely try in some capacity to be involved, just like they have in every, in any industry, in the cannabis industry, they try to get involved, making things medical and, but they don't have a lot of luck there as well, because you see what happens, the recreational market opens up and stuff like that. So I don't think that they'll have a lot of luck with it, but they will certainly try.
What's, in your opinion, if somebody was to start taking peptides, what are some good, maybe 3 peptides that somebody would want to look at? And I realize this would depend on what they're trying to fix, but what do you think has the most general application for the most people that are peptides?
Yeah, well, it definitely depends on what the goal is, and who the individual is. But, you can make some general statements. Any of the peptides that are growth hormone releasing peptides, I think that's going to benefit everybody. Growth hormone is present in everybody. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. And the benefits from that, you're going to have anti-aging benefits. You're going to have faster recovery. You're going to have an increased sort of metabolism. You're going to put on muscle mass a little bit better. You're going to sleep better. So that's anything that falls in that category. And there's quite a few options, but that is usually a safe bet for almost anybody looking to optimize, because you're going to get this wide range of benefits. And that would be one, for anybody who is interested in performance, in recovery, BPC and TB500, we're all a little banged up. You don't even necessarily have to be banged up or to have an injury, to use those. I use BPC 157 just because I'm getting old. And I still like to train, I used to train strongman, and I don't compete anymore, but lifting sandbags beats your body up.
For sure. Yeah.
For sure. So that helps with my recovery and stuff like that. So I like BPC. And, one that I really, really like, that I've been on for, I would say about 8 months, is GHKCU, which is known as the copper peptide. Got great anti-aging. Yeah. Got great anti-aging
Skin
properties.
Helps with your skin.
Hair,
correct?
skin. I was going bald. I was wearing a backwards hat the one day, and I have always had a decent hairline. And I was like looking at my hat, and I'm like, where's my hair that's kind of like right normally in here? And it was like, it wasn't there. And I started with GHKCU, the topical, and it stopped my hair loss and sort of reversed it. And I was very impressed, and I moved on to the injection. So it's a really good anti-aging one for hair, skin, stuff like that, which I think anybody's really attracted to at this point. We all want to age kind of gracefully, at least. So
is there any progress in the peptide market for oral peptides? Because I know that amino acid chains can get denatured in your stomach, and that's why you take them subcutaneously. But I feel like they're I saw that Ozempic has an oral form now too. Is that correct?
Yeah, and they're also working on a once a month shot, which is similar to tirzepatide.
Right.
They're working on a once a month for that. The problem is exactly how you stated it. These are amino acid chains, and they're very sensitive to what happens in the gut. So they lose efficiency, quite a bit. And the king will always be injection.
Right.
That's the best way to get things into your bloodstream undisturbed. It's got the highest bioavailability, and that will always be the best. They'll probably try other things just like they have with TRT.
Right.
They try the gels and they try the pellets and stuff like that. And for some people, some people cannot ever do an injection.
Right.
There are some people who
I view that as a limiting factor, because there's some people that are so just like, I'm not going to do that, on a consistent basis. Yeah. But that's general population. I'd say peptides still are in the early adopter stage,
Very much so.
But, I do think it's swinging into, mass adoption.
Without a doubt.
And so I feel like if you get into the, soccer mom stage, there are a lot of those that are like, I'm not going to inject myself all the time.
Yeah. That's probably one of the most common concerns. I do all of our messaging, and I talk to people all the time. I'm sort of the front facing aspect of the company when it comes to consumer education. So that is probably one of our most common questions.
Right.
Is there an alternative? And yeah, sure there is. Is it going to be as effective?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, the growth hormone producing peptides being safe for male and female. What kind of female population would you say is part of the Summit Rejuvenation clinics?
Like what percentage?
Yeah, just like how is it something that you feel like is heavily male populated, or are you guys seeing a good amount of females coming as well?
So I've been with Summit now for over 3 years, and the female aspect is blowing up.
I'm sure it's the fastest
not
growing.
only with peptides, but also with TRT. You have to remember, men have been lied to about testosterone for years.
Let's unpack that lie too when you get a chance. I want to make sure that our listeners hear that.
And women have been lied to even more. Women were told, men were told, oh, you'll be sterile, you'll go bald, you'll have roid rage. Women were told that they would turn into men and have breast cancer. And to date, there is still no widely accepted, standardized medical guidelines for dosing for women. And there are some phenomenal scientists and doctors. Dr. Kelly Campersand is one of them. She's probably the best when it comes to that. And she advocates for women because, testosterone is upstream of everything else. Your estrogen levels, everything else comes from where your testosterone levels are at. And women have suffered with perimenopause for years. And it was just kind of, it's part of life. Enjoy the next 5 years of your life where, you're in a tailspin. And that's totally avoidable,
right?
For almost all women. And it's just a matter of balancing their hormones. So that has exploded thanks to people like Dr. Kelly Campersand and a lot of other scientists who have just pushed back in general on testosterone. So women have really come into the marketplace quite a bit. And they're very thankful for that because I've never experienced perimenopause, I never will, but from what I understand, it's absolutely it's at a horrendous point of your life.
Right.
And then same thing with peptides. Peptides are kind of they've caught fire very quickly. You see it all over social media now, and especially with the anti-aging stuff, women are very interested in that. So I'd say probably about 30% of our population.
Outside of that, the GHK, what is the other peptides that come to mind for you for anti-aging?
Any of the growth hormone ones are going to be, really good. Growth hormone is linked, to reduction of inflammation. Another one, you saw that one right there. That's CJC ipamorelin. That's a duo blend that we offer. That's two different ones. They work together. Maximum growth hormone release, and all of these natural. The thing that's really cool about peptides in general is it's a natural stimulation. So you're not suppressing anything at all. You're sending, peptides are signals, and they're very specific signals, and they're just signaling the body to do what it already does. Whereas like with TRT, not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but it does suppress the system. Mm-hmm. And if you come off, it'll go back. But with peptides, you're just kind of adding more of that signal and getting the body to do something, and so any of the growth hormone ones are great for anti-aging. NAD is another one. NAD is not a peptide, it's a coenzyme, but it works in a similar fashion. NAD helps with mitochondrial health. So quick science lesson, for anybody that forgets high school, biology, mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. So they are responsible for producing the energy for all cellular function. So what happens over time is your mitochondria just kind of start to decline. There's a lot that can go wrong with them. So it's like it's the same thing as if you're operating at 90%. Right? You still have to do all the work that you have to do in your business and in life and in your family and all these things, but you're not quite operating. You're getting it all done, but you're not getting it done efficiently, and that beats you up. And as that beats you up, now you're operating at 80%, at 70%, and you're still working. You're still getting all the things done, but that accumulation of stress is what causes aging. So the more stressful any of these cellular functions are, the harder the cell has to work. the harder the cell has to work, the more oxidative stress you have. The more oxidative stress you have, the more inflammation you have, the more free radicals you have in your body, and you begin to look and age faster. So anything with mitochondrial health, your SS31, your MOTS-C, your NAD+, those are all really good because they're restoring mitochondrial function to where it should be. And that's another one of my favorites is NAD+. And,
super
SS31.
interesting. Yeah, I've done an NAD+, and it gives you a totally different day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And glutathione would be the last one. That's a very strong antioxidant. That's a tripeptide. So it's just 3. Excuse me. But that is probably the strongest antioxidant in the body. So that's going to flush out all the oxidative stress. So that's one you would be doing like once a week. And if you pair that with something that's increasing your mitochondrial function, now you're flushing out all the crap that has accumulated in the body, throughout the week and throughout the years. And then at the same time, now you're accumulating less crap because you're bringing your body to where it should be in terms of function.
How do those, like glutathione, the NAD+, how would those from Summit Rejuvenation compare to ones you can buy over the counter, since those are things that are capable of just getting over the counter and it's not so much gray?
Yeah, same thing. Your NAD and your NMN, which is like a sort of a precursor to NAD, it's going to help. It's just not as effective as injection. Injection is always going to be the best way to do it, but there's plenty of evidence that shows that those do work. It's just not going to work as well.
Brother, have you had liposomal L-glutathione? Because it is the most disgusting thing in
the grossest
supplements.
tasting thing on earth. Yeah.
I have not had the pleasure.
That was so bad tasting. I'm like, man. Oof,
you want to get people to be about injections, right?
Yeah, just give them
that. Hey,
like,
you can inject this,
me.
or you can taste this. It's easy sell.
It's like somebody like quit Fear Factor over that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Leo, I want to talk to you about Recovery CBD as well, because specifically we have our like biggest CBD producer, I feel like, in Kansas City, and one of the biggest names I feel like in the game is American Shaman, and they're under some duress right now. They're under some critiques.
Well, explain to us what's going on with the shaman.
What is up with?
There's a couple things going on with the shaman.
Can we start with 7OH?
And it's so funny before you tell a story. Leo had this concern 2 years ago.
It was a long time ago. Yeah,
Leo and I spent a lot of time together in the car, just driving, just talking. And I remember when this stuff hit the market, and he was like, "Mm-mm." He's like, first of all, he said it's not going to be around for long. He said it, and then we actually was that a TG?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll let you tell that story.
Well, the first thing that I saw with it was people in the bodybuilding community. I mean, we've all been around that, so we know that typically the bodybuilder is this is good, more is better, more is better. So they started using kratom for pre-workout, for sleep, and for pain. And one of the biggest issues with the 7OH is it's not labeled very well for what it is. So I've seen multiple bodybuilders that they go down this rabbit hole of, well, I'm taking this much kratom. Well, I can buy this strength for this much and take this much. And then they do end up with a full-on opiate habit.
Is kratom and 7OH the same thing? It's just a different...
I say kratom has a ton of different strands in quotes, right? So are we demonizing kratom, or is it specifically this one strand?
No. So what 7OH is, the amount of 7OH that is in a bottle that somebody would buy is in 2 full trees of kratom leaf. So it's a super, super extracted molecule that has... it is.
So is it made synthetically then? Probably. It's not actually.
It's extracted down.
Is it?
It comes from the plant. It's not made synthetically. It is derived from the plant.
That's crazy.
I believe.
Yeah.
But it's caused a lot of problems for people. I mean, the protocol at the emergency room, if people are used to it, is Suboxone. People are put on the same things if they came in with a fentanyl or a heroin addiction. And then the other issue that these stores are going to run into is in November, we have some changes to the Farm Bill. And as it stands now, they're going to remove all intoxicating hemp products. So anytime you see THC, well, anywhere here in Kansas, because we don't have a state legal cannabis program, or if you see it in a vape store, if you see anything that's not in a licensed dispensary, then that means it's hemp-derived THC. So that has really gotten to the point where people are making, it started with 5 milligram drinks and 10 milligram drinks, and now they're making 25s and 50s, and they're selling them at bars, and, there's an argument that they are going over the line as to where the regulation should be, because they're going to now.
Is this like Delta 9, Delta 8 type stuff here, Leo?
Yep.
So I went into, one of the name of the KC places that got, listed in the Missouri, they were flagged for selling THC products, right? Mm-hmm. I went into one of those once, and my sister used to be a rep for a cannabis company in Missouri, just like a gummy company, right? And I just told her, I was like, hey, I went into this random place that didn't have like your classic dispensary security. I didn't have to give them my ID. No. This felt like I was just going into like a vape store of some sort. And they were sitting straight up just being like, yeah, we've got pre-rolls. We've got, all this stuff. And I'm like, but it's the same as what I get at a dispensary or something. They're like, no, it's the same. It's just all hemp derived. It's all THC. I'm like, but it's not just like Delta 9.
Well, so there's a couple things to unpack there. So Delta 8 is a synthetic cannabinoid created from CBD isolate. So there's some type of alchemy. I don't totally understand it, where they can take CBD isolate, which is pure. It's what I use in my products. It's 99% plus pure CBD. It goes through an alchemy process, and it comes out as a Delta 8. And they have Delta 7 and Delta 0. Picture the pro hormone game.
Yeah.
Okay, same thing. Now, you also have THCA. So
that's 9. Is that the Delta 9A?
No,
Sorry.
No.
Okay.
So the 2018 Farm Bill only banned Delta 9 THC. Mm-hmm. Okay, Delta 9 is what is intoxicating. It's what gets you high. How THC exists on the plant is THCA, THC acid. Okay. That's what will convert to Delta 9, but it needs to be decarboxylated, which is being heated above 180 degrees. So that's why you smoke it. That's why if you ever made brownies back in the day, you were extracting and decarboxylating that cannabis. So you grind it up.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. I knew that's exactly what you were doing. You just didn't know that.
Very focused on.
So basically, Walter White.
Very all chemistry at that point in my life.
So what you were doing is you were using the butter, because the cannabinoids bind to fats. So we're using the butter to extract the THC from the flower. It would then attach to the butter. And then because you're heating it above 180 degrees, you're converting that from THCA to Delta 9, which is what gets you intoxicated. So these stores are, yes, they're selling cannabis with THCA and saying that we can sell this because it's not Delta 9.
Hasn't been converted yet.
It hasn't been converted yet. As soon as you smoke it, it is. Now, the quality and how it's being made, being totally unregulated. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Chinese mafia and how in-depth they are in cannabis right now.
No.
Yeah,
educate us.
That's an
in Kansas City,
separate podcast.
Oklahoma,
no kidding.
Oklahoma, Maine, any of the low barrier, and then they have a lot of black market as well. But they like to target the low barrier to entry cannabis markets, where they can get a license and be quote unquote legal, but then they just go way over their plant counts. They go way over what they're allowed to do, and they'll ship it out of state. Tucker Carlson's had a couple episodes about this. So that's the flower that you're going to be getting. And they are notoriously using some of the worst pesticides, some of the worst types of heavy metals. The pesticides they use, they have to smuggle into the country because they're not even legal here, which you guys know how many pesticides we allow here in the first place.
I was about to say.
Yeah. That says enough right there.
So you're really talking like worse than the wild, wild west as far as a lot of that is concerned. Now, again, there's good operators that are going to lose when this bill changes, because there are products that are currently 3% THC that are making a nice cannabinoid profile and like a craft product. And now potentially what's going to change is the total allowable THC. So one of the loopholes that they start using is, okay, This gummy weighs 4 grams. So that means 3% of this is, what are we talking about? You know, you can get up to hundreds of milligrams technically,
right,
and be under 3%.
Be like 120 milligrams.
Yeah.
Right. So now they're saying we can make this 100 milligrams because it's less than 3% of the volume of what we're selling.
Mm-hmm.
And then
perfect for a gummy.
for a gummy. But that's why you see a lot of 25 and 50, and you see the drinks. So the total volume of the drink is, 10 ounces or 20 ounces, whatever it might be. We can make that 3% Delta 8 synthesized THC. So it's really gone pretty wild. And actually Ian can tell you, it was one of the first things that when I started formulating my products was I didn't put any THC in it because I knew that's where they were going to come for our lunch eventually. I knew that, we can't have nice things, so that 3%, I knew that we were going to continue to push that. And if you want to hear a little bit of a conspiratorial aspect from me, if you look at when this happened, anybody that saw when this happened, it got thrown into the government reopening bill back in it was October or November, and everybody was like, what the fuck, who cares about that? Like, and when we're trying to get TSA, we're trying to get the government back open, why does this matter? Well, the thing that happened right before that was Trump announced moving cannabis to Schedule 3. So if you ask my opinion, the administration would have gone to the people that can provide Schedule 3. So Schedule 3 is pharmaceutical grade. Your DEA licensed, your FDA licensed, your USDA licensed if you're growing something. So when you go to the people that have the Schedule 3 factories, they're going to say, yeah, we'll take that. Well, we're not competing with an unregulated gas station market. That needs to go away. So in my opinion, it's Big Pharma, like you guys were talking about, taking a big chunk of this for themselves and saying this other regulation, this other market needs to go away if we're going to invest our billions of dollars in testing and funding and production. And it's interesting because, you could see this go all the way to you have to get it the same way you get your Adderall. It has to be produced the same way that the Adderall is produced. So you have all these non-conforming state legal cannabis industry that it's really up in the air. The worst extreme of it is the government says, yeah, you guys can't do that. We're not letting you do that. Now, there is definitely an option where they partner with these state programs and the people that are already doing business, and now you need to work with the DEA and the FDA, and if you can ramp up to that level, then you can stay in the business. But a lot of it to me looks like a big grab by Big Pharma to get cannabis. And, you may have to get it at CVS. You may have to get it where you buy a Schedule 3 product. You may not be able to go in and choose from 10 strains and different drinks. And, that's really like the nightmare scenario for everybody in the industry, is that it really becomes very pharma and medically driven. The hope is that as this rolls out, the people that are in the industry at least have an option and a way and a path to stay in it. But what they're doing is not legal with the FDA. It's not allowed by the federal government. If you even go back to Obama was raiding dispensaries in California that were state legal not that long ago. So it's a very interesting time, and there is definitely, in my opinion, a need for some regulation. And it's an interesting situation for me because I did start making these products in my kitchen. And I had beakers, just so everybody knows. It wasn't in the sink, okay? I had worked in a dispensary. I had learned how to make these things, and it was small batch, and it was, 1,000 milliliter beakers. If you go to my Instagram, I got some old photos of that stuff up there. But based on that's
the original product line right there.
Well, that's version 2. The first version was labels printed.
Yeah, they were white, weren't they?
They were white, yeah, and labels that were printed off of my printer. So it's interesting because the higher the barrier of entry gets, like I wouldn't have been able to start that way, right? And so I don't want to be like, oh, fucking get that ladder up, man. Yeah. Jesus, they're coming for me. Yeah. But at the same time, I see what else has happened. And I would argue that you shouldn't have an unregulated 25 milligram THC drink available at the bar. Now, whether they should exist in the same place is a different conversation. I mean, we don't even have lounges to use state legal cannabis in most places.
Yeah, so, people have no idea of like what a proper dose is with that, especially when it comes to mixing with alcohol. That has become a major problem because, you know, it's you're taking one intoxicant and you're used to drinking XYZ beers, whatever it is, and then you're adding in something that you don't really know anything about, and honestly, neither does the liquor store or the bar that's selling it to you. So it's like you're getting this dangerous scenario where
you're selling drinks that have 25 milligrams in them at the bars right now.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's unbelievable, man. I mean, like,
I feel like you sell it to the wrong person. They're like out of it for the next
It's a huge
30
liability.
days.
It's a huge liability.
And then from the other aspect, if someone has 6 Jack and Cokes and then drinks one of those and wraps their car around the tree, who's going to get blamed?
Right.
What's the propaganda going to say? Right. He had a weed drink. Yeah. Well, I mean, he had 8 fucking alcoholic drinks before he had that. Yeah. So I feel an interesting point because, you know, I've seen some of this stuff. Like I said, there should be some regulation, but at what level? You know, it's like we may wind up with, and I've always anticipated this, FDA regulation that will require GMP certification for just like most other natural supplements that are out there. That changes things for me significantly. I'm not buying a GMP certified factory anytime soon. So then I'm shifting to a private label or a white label from a bigger manufacturer that's changing my cost to do business. So it's really, we're going to go from the wild, wild west to probably overregulated. And then hopefully
that doesn't happen in America.
No way, right? Yeah, not Never. Possible.
When you get to this point where, you know, it feels like it's overregulated, is that going to change your guys' business model at all?
Well, it's going to change it on the back end for sure. Yeah. You know, I have some relationships. I'm actually going to visit a pretty large manufacturer in Colorado next week to sort of try to set myself up for if that changes and have the relationships in place. And then, but yeah, it means it's going to change the margin by a lot. Yeah. You know, the difference between being able to produce it myself and if you go to the Instagram, I've really tried to show that I've built out a facility that's very clean. It operates very well. Products are made under very good standards. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, dude, I like that you've been posting these. It's cool to see.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, and to me, like, you know, what's funny to me is that I could make all of that product and I make less of a mess than making 20 pieces when I started. You know? I mean, I clean
time under tension. We were talking about that earlier.
Right. I mean, you get better in time.
You know, in both of these conversations, it's in these businesses, you have to always be looking ahead, and that's definitely something I've learned. You know, at Summit, and also, you know, with Leo being my partner, is, you know, I came aboard and I knew very little, and he was thinking ahead from year one. I mean, it was you. If you're going to be in an industry where the government is going to have a heavy hand, you have to sort of always be planning well in advance for a number of possibilities, you know, and that it makes things complicated, but, you know, but if you pay attention enough, I mean, he's always put us in a very good position, you know, thus far. You know, with the way that the product is currently made, it's like, you know, no THC, and I didn't understand that when I first came on.
Right.
And we've had to educate consumers as to why that is. But, you know, that has really guided us quite well. So in these industries, it's very important that you're not just creating a product and selling it. You've got to really be looking at what's going on, what the government is doing, what other people are doing, because, you know, like you said, sometimes we can't have nice stuff. You know, you have companies that are great operations, and then they have to now adapt because you have, you know, you have other people who are doing crazy things, and then the government comes in as a result of it.
I mean, same thing with supplement industry. Yeah. You know, 1,3 pro hormones. The list kind of goes on. But yeah, it's sometimes they catch you out of nowhere. But then there's some ingredients, like, you know, when 1,3 was on the market, where you just knew, you're like,
it's just a matter of time.
This is a matter of time.
Can't build a business
very
around
itchy
that.
today. You know? This is not
right. ephedrine was like that too. The way that supplement superstores got
Pro
ephedra
hormones.
that I used to take.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked at Gold's Gym in '99, and
It's just
the
mile home.
amount of fucking ephedra drinks that we would just be ripping out of the fridge
Speed stacks
throughout the day. Oh,
Speed stacks.
Hey, the original red line.
the original red line. That was the first one that like really.
People,
this is
the
what
amount
a
of
heart
people that
attack
have drank
feels like.
something.
I haven't think I had my first
VPX,
red line
man,
at
they
like
were
13.
they were cutting edge.
Red line crawled so banged energy drinks could run.
I had my
So
first
that
one of those
super
at like
creatine
13,
could've-
and it gave me my first heart attack, I think.
You're like, oh my God. The first time I ever walked into supplement superstores, we used to sell a product called Max Thermogenic. And I walked in, I talked to him, and he was like, I was like, man, what kind of protein you guys got? And he was like, let me show you this Max Thermogenic over here. Took me over there. He was like, it's got ephedrine in it. And I was like, all right, I'm sold, dude.
So I'm looking to get big.
You ever had an ECA stack, bro?
yeah, let
me help you
Let me
out.
show you this, buddy.
It was $38.99.
Right.
Still remember. What a deal.
Many years ago now.
So I want to say that my first, interaction with CBD was with Charlotte's Web, that brand, and it was in 2016. And the amount that it helped people, I'll never forget, wondering, how, is this another one of those things? It's just a, fly by night, kind of flash in the pan style product category. And I'll never forget meeting a father who drove from Manhattan, Kansas to our store in Overland Park because he simply saw that Charlotte's Web was sold in our stores and it was the closest place he could get it. And he was like, he drove 3 hours, to come to our store and bought a handful of bottles. And I'm just like, wow, like nobody does that for a product. What's going on? He's like, well, my daughter gets seizures, right? She's epileptic. Is that the phrase I'm looking for? Yeah. She's epileptic. And he's like, we've tried every medication. We've been to every doctor. He's like, this is the only thing that when I started giving it to her, she stopped having seizures and it's life-changing, and I've seen tons more stories like that happen since. But how has kind of the landscape changed? And I'd ask you this specifically, Leo, because of your history with the brand and with the products, seeing how, as THC products have become more legalized and become easily attainable, has that changed kind of the marketplace for CBD and what people are seeking it out for?
Well, so in my opinion, what it's done is it's muddied the water a lot more. Originally it was a battle, back 4 or 5 years ago to get people to understand the difference between CBD and THC. And now I think you see THC, CBD on the gas station, at the vape shop, all these different places. And I think it creates a negative connotation to more people that could benefit from CBD. So I've always had my eyes on the horizon of when is the marketplace going to shuffle and really have these products land where they should be sold. There's a lot of people that have tried to get into this. Typically people get in with a big investment and then they're private labeling and they're working with these agencies that are super expensive to run ads. And then of course that has a diminishing return over time. And you see these businesses, I say I've been building a bank vault for a foundation and I've been watching these companies go up 17 layers of scaffolding and then, they're gone. So what I think will happen with this regulation is you won't see the CBD store anymore. If they can't sell the THCA, if they can't sell the drinks, they're going to have a very difficult time keeping their doors open on a few SKUs. And I describe it like in supplements, it would be like trying to open a creatine store. I mean, what's the benefit here is not only is it at the variety, but how many uses can one customer have when they come in here? They're taking multiple things daily. So now if you're just trying to sell a CBD product, you're only getting one use, maybe two out of a customer per day. I have a very small percentage that's 3. Maybe they use 2 tinctures and a topical daily, but that's going to be a very small segment of the market. So I've said for a long time where these products are going to land is supplement stores, dispensaries, natural food stores. The CBD store itself is not going to have the legs to continue after this regulation. And that's where I've had the horizon. We were talking before.
I've always thought it was crazy anyways that there was full on CBD stores, I mean, we have an American Shaman that's in our parking lot that's at Overland Park.
Yeah.
And I went in there one time, and yeah, it just kind of always blew my mind because I know what the price per square foot on that.
Yeah. Well, when somebody's going in there and they're buying a drink and they're buying a pre-roll, they're buying a gummy, and then maybe they're buying a topical, you're having a lot more different things that they can shop for.
Right.
Whereas now, if you can't sell those things, it's going to be very, very hard again for
Right.
that square footage to keep it open. Could you keep this open just on protein? That's
Maybe on protein, but
maybe
certainly not on creatine or anything else like that. Regardless of how great it is, you need to have obviously practical use in a lot of different ways for it to, be your entire storefront.
Yeah. So, we were talking earlier about the retail relationships. That's why those are so important to me, because eventually this is going to funnel down to being in the correct marketplace. I mean, I've seen big corrections in it even since, 2018, when it was the shadiest looking vape store in the town is where you would get these gummies, and I would buy them there. And now you have CBD stores. CBD American Shaman does put a good store together. When you walk in, it's a good retail experience. What I've been looking for, though, is when it's going to become an off-the-shelf product. It's funny for some of us who know Chris Klein. 3 years ago, I said to Chris Klein, I think it's going to be about 5 years. He goes, oh, no, it's going to be a lot longer than that. I'm like, oh, shit. I wish it was anybody but you saying that to me. Yeah, you're the only guy I know that I can't argue with him. And, we're 3 years later, and we're definitely more than 5 years away still. So he's right about that.
That's funny.
You guys, you've been around, you've been on the road, you've been to a lot of different retailers. What are, retailers that are selling CBD getting right, and what are the ones that are getting wrong, and what you guys have seen firsthand?
I think first I would say just customer education. That's always been our biggest objective, is to educate the customer, because CBD exploded onto the marketplace, and it was sort of like a catch-all for everything, and you could get it everywhere too. Like you could get it. First it was like the shady stores, but then it was also in the gas station. It was here, it was there, and it's like your average person was getting so much information that they couldn't figure out what it was. Like there were people who were like, so it's weed. And it's like, no, not at all.
Yeah.
Hemp derived though, right?
Yeah. But they're also asking the guy that works at the gas station who's just like,
I don't care.
Do you
I want to
this?
sell it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
well, then the other thing I always say is, you see this at the gas station, you hear it helps with your anxiety. You want to tell everybody in the gas station you have anxiety, trying to ask the guy behind the counter if it's going to help your anxiety?
Right.
Sounds like you get quite a bit of anxiety from that.
Right.
So yeah, the big thing is the customer education. That's one of the reasons why S2 is such a great fit for us, because you guys spend a lot of time with the customers. If it's the type of shop where people are just coming in for their pre-workout, and it doesn't just sit on the shelf and sell itself. Yeah. And we're always willing to put in the legwork that it takes to support our retailers, but it's a matter of how responsive they are to that. I mean, there's a few stores out there that are sort of bad money to me. That
quite a few.
A few, easy. But where it's just like, man, I think that wound up giving us more of a negative connotation, because they didn't do the things. They didn't allow me to be involved. There wasn't the education side of it, so it sat there. And then it's not only bad for the brand within that store, within the people that work in that store. And now we've even seen situations where, these people partner with somebody else, and they kind of fucking piss in the Cheerios with the other retailer and say, that didn't work, even though it was doing okay here. It's never like, no, it did work, and then it winds up being better on both. It's always that like, oh, maybe you're right. And I've even told you guys, it's not going to outrun, the latest, greatest pre-workout on the shelf. I do think in the next year to 18 months, like I was just talking about, you're going to see a lot of orphaned people that are going to be looking for product, and you'll start to see people coming to supplement stores more often for it, because wherever you
make a note of this, we need to put that into marketing.
Yeah, up it. I mean,
Orphans welcome.
Right.
I mean, one of my biggest initiatives right now is to be able to be found on the internet, is to get that message to retailers, because the other thing is, and I know S2 experienced this, there was that big push, and then there was a big lull, you know, and then it really slowed down. And there's a lot of supplement stores that just have a bad taste in their mouth about carrying CBD because they expired out half of what they had.
Well,
in
when
2023.
it dropped off, it dropped off relatively quick with
it fell off.
Yeah,
it fell off. Yeah.
And so it was like at one point I was like maxing my orders on it, and then it was just like overnight. It was crazy.
Well, there was a huge saturation.
Right.
You know, that was I'm guessing that was like 2022, 2023.
Yeah.
You know, so the way things landed, this is really interesting. We all know Andy, and Andy's, you know, just don't quit, just stay on that fucking island, whatever you got to do. So for me, I started in 2020. 2020 was supposed to be the big year for CBD. You have to figure the Farm Bill passed in 2018, but it's a crop. So it needed to be grown in 2019,
Right. Yeah.
harvested, extracted, and turned into finished product for 2020. Well, COVID hit, which made my life fucking hell, like most of us. I mean, a small business owner starting right then. I guess I got nothing.
Too bad for you,
I got
was it?
nothing compared to this guy, but at the same time, just that message of don't quit. So what happened was, because most of these companies, it wasn't their main thing.
Yeah.
You know, it was an investment from a group of people. It was somebody getting into it, you know, through a manufacturer. You know, the manufacturers were set up to private label you, just like franchising at McDonald's, except instead of a physical space, you got a website. They had brands ready, they had labels ready, they had, you know, names ready for you, and you just give us $50,000 and you watch. Well, a lot of people backed out because that wasn't a good time to start a business. So my original business model was to go all direct to customer through events, through tabling, through the sampling that I do. And then when all that got canceled, you know, that was a pretty big blow. But because all of those companies that quit, there wound up being a huge surplus 6 months later. So the material price dropped 90% in that 6 months.
I remember.
So then that's what allowed me to be able to wholesale it, because the strength that I believed in at the price point that I believed in when I started, I could only sell direct to customer.
Right.
I had worked in a dispensary. I learned that there was only so many people that were going to drive 3 hours and pay $160 for that bottle, especially on a long term. One thing that wound up being really good for me is that I was trying to sell CBD even before I had my brand in a dispensary. So, you know, I'm trying to sell this up against some very good cannabis products that they could buy instead. So it really got me to like hone in on, you know, what was important for the consumer. So going back to, had I quit, which I had every indication in the world that I should not continue doing this and I should try something else, then I wouldn't have reached that point where that material price dropped off, and then I was able to wholesale. And once I was able to wholesale is when I was really able to put a strategy together and hit the road and be a lot more aggressive.
It's good that the material price dropped off, because a lot of times what people do is, you know, the price goes down, but the price, you know, they don't reflect it.
Well, a lot of people still did that.
Right.
There's still a lot of that.
Right.
You know, I've just always believed, you know, the price never really changed since then. It's fluctuated slightly, but I've gone up in strength in my products once, and, you know, we're about to do it again here in probably the next 30 to 60 days. I'm going to increase the strength on all of my products without going up in the price. You know, my goal is was always be able to provide a value that a consumer could use every day. Mm-hmm. You know, these bottles, these topical bottles here, there's 400 pumps in there. Most uses are going to be 2 to 3 pumps tops, right? So you're getting 150 to 200 uses out of that bottle. Now, some people have 5 uses to wake up in the morning, right? That's why it's an as-needed product. People ask how long it'll last. Yeah.
I love that stuff on my low back.
Right. So, there's people that get up and you got both knees, your shoulder, and your neck. Well, that's 4 uses.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
Let me see the red one.
The same thing with the tinctures. Our sleep products are about $1.50 a day for a good quality night's sleep. And some of the stronger tinctures, we make a 3,500 milligram bottle that's CBD and CBG that retails for $65. It's excellent for overall chronic inflammation and pain. We have a lot of great response for people with autoimmune disorders. Lyme disease, it provides a lot of great use for. The CBG is neuroprotective, and your autoimmune disorders are general neurological inflammation, whichever diagnosis you have, that's sort of where it's coming from.
Right.
So that's, again, $2 a day. For the people that need it and really get the value out of that, it's well worth it.
Right.
I feel like you guys...
Ian, Lyme disease, CIA?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd take that one for sure. For sure.
It's got to be.
For sure.
Alpha Gal,
They just
for
dropped,
sure.
They just dropped a
terrified
new
of
batch
getting
of
that.
ticks too.
Right.
They just dropped a new batch of ticks. Bill Gates was working on that.
Yeah.
Really? What's the?
It makes
what's
you
cause?
like allergic to.
Yeah, that's the Alpha Gal.
Oh, Alpha Gal. Yeah. That's big around us.
Yeah.
Dude.
This is the first place that I had really started to see it a lot because the lotion and that heat product have lanolin in it.
Yeah.
So people were like, I've got to check the ingredients, make sure there's no animal components parts. Sounds kind of gross. But there's no animal components in it. And the lanolin from sheep, people are allergic to that. They can't use that.
I only know about lanolin because of Anchorman.
Sheep's wool?
Said lanolin? That's what it says. Sounds like sheep's wool. I want to shift gears a little bit to you, Ian. You've got a handful of businesses that you've started, and it seems like there's obviously centered around helping men. A lot of the different businesses help out with center around with helping men, men's group, one-on-one coaching. You do fitness coaching, the rejuvenation clinics. But I want to talk about your book, Find Your Hill, specifically. What drove you to want to write that book, and can we fit it in a podcast?
Well, so the book was an interesting story. I'll give you a quick rundown of it. So the book started out as a book about what was going on during COVID, specifically at the gym. We were actually approached by somebody who wanted to write, just kind of sit in on what was going on. Very early on, this person approached us and wanted to sort of chronicle what was going on.
This is when you guys were still operating, and try to give everybody the elevator pitch of what's going on at Attilas Gym.
We had just opened up. We had just opened up, and the proverbial shit had hit the fan. And we were under assault from every angle in the state of New Jersey, and in the media and everything like that. And this person approached us and said, "Hey, this is a story. And this is a piece of American history." Gave me the whole pitch and basically said, let me sit in on this. Let's write this book, and we'll publish it, and we'll all split the profits. So I was like, sure, why not? It was at that point, it was kind of like, just stay out of the way, because we were treading water in the middle of the ocean at that point, in shark infested waters with huge waves. Like every day was a battle. We had no idea what we were waking up to on any given day, whether it would be the health department, the state police, the sheriff's department, the courts. It was chaos. So that book never came out. That person sort of overstated their ability to write a book.
They're like, I can't read. So
quite a bit. And also, it never came out because it took 2.5 years for that whole saga to finish. And by the time, it did, I had moved on from the gym once things had calmed down, and this person wound up, saying, well, let's just write a book about you. You've got an interesting story. The gym will be part of it, but let's talk about your life beforehand. Let's talk about your time in prison. Let's talk about, how you've been through some things. You've made some serious mistakes in your life, and you didn't turn out so bad. So they produced that book, and it was absolutely terrible. And I cannot overstate that enough. This person had sort of, when I say fabricated, completely lied about their capacity to write a book. So at that point, I had already run a pre-sale And people were waiting for a book for quite some time. So I was under the gun. So I turned around and wrote the book myself.
Wow, dude, that's a crazy story.
I wrote
I had
it.
no clue about that.
Yeah. It was actually it was a very stressful experience because my reputation was online. There were people like, "Hey, I bought this pre-sale a year ago. Where's my book?"
Yeah, man, you just grifting us.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Totally.
And it's like, my capacity sort of online has always been my reputation. The COVID was, not the start of it. I had built a good reputation as a personal trainer, always doing the right thing, helping people, running an honest business. And then during COVID, I became sort of a hero story, and everything that came of that was built on, the reputation that people could count on me to do the right thing. And that I was honest. And so that was not fun. So I turned around, I wrote this book, and I put it out, and it was a really great experience. Writing a book about yourself is very difficult. I wrote it the first time, and then you read it and every sentence starts with I or me, and you just sound like a total idiot. You're like, oh, I did this, and then I went here, and it sounds like, if you've ever been in a conversation where you're like, oh, like this person's just telling you everything about how great their life is or whatever. So I read it the first time and I was absolutely horrified. I was like, this is terrible, and I would call myself an above average writer. I went to college. I was a pre-law major and a philosophy major. So I used to write a lot. So I was good, but I read this and I was just like, I can't put this out. So then,
did you have anybody else read it, Ian? Just to sorry to interrupt your flow of the story,
not
but
until I was,
because it was more like the, does it differ at all from your ability? You've built a phenomenal personal brand. How does that differ from building a personal brand, talking into the camera on social media, et cetera, versus writing the book and a lot of I, like you're saying?
Well, my personal brand has always been, kind of me talking about what is not good. You know what I mean? The government was really kind of in my crosshairs for a while. And that's very easy. It's easy to criticize, so that was always much easier. Turning around and writing a book about yourself. And what you have to do is you have to create, you want to deliver this story, but you want people to be in your shoes. You're not talking at them, you're talking with them. You know what I mean? But it's a one-way conversation, but you want them to feel like they're reading a story and not just a list of your accomplishments and your ups and downs, because that's very boring. Right. You know what I mean? So you want them to be thinking during it, and you have to be sort of creative in the way that you write, so that it's not just I, me, I did this, I said that. That's a horrible read. So it took me a couple more versions, and I ultimately finished it. But the whole premise of the book when I wrote it was I was thrust into the mainstream, and I was a hero, right? And it's that's a really easy story to tell. It's very easy to talk about your accomplishments. And I didn't want people to get the impression that when they read it and be like, man, that guy's awesome. I wish I could never do that. He's so brave. They didn't have that capacity within them. So I started the book with my darkest moments. I started the book about how when I was 20 years old, I got in a car accident and caused the death of a young man. Because I haven't lived a perfect life. I've messed up more than I've succeeded. I've done more bad things than I've done good things. And I wanted people to understand that you're never too far gone to turn the page and to do better. And you can literally do that today. It's a decision, and a decision that I had to make because, I did that, and there was other stuff too. I was raised by a single mother, and I put her through hell. So it's I had a lot of scars on my record, and I had to make the decision as a man at some point to say, either you continue this, right, and you just, this is who you are, or you say, I'm going to leave all this behind me and I'm going to do something better. So I wanted people to read that and understand that, just because everybody loved me during COVID doesn't mean that my life has been perfect. Yeah. And that anybody can do these things. And that's how I sort of closed the book was, I open with that. I talk about COVID. I talk about my life and, what I have built in the face of my own, because most of the problems in my life have been self-inflicted. I didn't grow up in destitution or poverty or anything like that. Like most of my problems have been because of my own choices. But I wanted to close the book where people were like, man, this guy was just a regular dude who made a good choice at the right time. And, people think that you can't make a change in the world, but you have no idea who's watching you make those good decisions, and that decision to open the gym, a lot of people were faced with that decision. And this is not a criticism to people, but like a lot of people kept their businesses open quietly. I could have done that as well, but that doesn't show the world around you what the right thing to do is. Because the right thing to do in that situation was to say, screw you guys, this is wrong. I'm going to open my gym. But I didn't make that decision thinking, man, I hope all these people are watching me and they do the same thing. I made that decision because that was the right decision for myself, my family, the community that we had built at the gym, and the country as a whole. But I was just an obscure gym owner. I was just some guy in South Jersey in a sleepy suburb who owned a gym. And that one decision inspired so many other people. But there's nothing special about me. There's no feature of me that nobody else has. We all have that capacity to make a good choice. So
the book really, let everybody know that they're just as capable as you are.
We all have that. We all have that in different capacities. And it might not turn into a national news story, but you don't know who's watching you. When you go to work every day, and you're just an employee, right? Or, whatever it is, and you work really hard, right? Sure, your bosses are watching you, but that other employee, who might not be seeing things so clearly, might look at you and go, man, I can do that too. Because they see what happens when you work hard. They see you move up in the company. They see you do that. And you don't know where that person's at or what they're thinking or what they're struggling with at the moment. And you can set that example. It's the same thing in anything that you do.
Right.
And that's really the tone I wanted to leave. The lesson that I wanted to leave is like, we've told ourselves this big lie our whole lives that somehow the choices that we make don't matter, that we're powerless in the world. That, I'm just one person. And it's like, yeah, so was I. But, that one person made a choice to open a gym and it inspired, I've talked to thousands of people. Hey, I didn't take the vaccine because of you. Because of what you did, I fought for mask mandates in the schools, because of this. And it's like, man, I didn't open the gym thinking anybody would do that. But, and that capacity lies within each of us. And I think if more people realize that, we wind up with a better world because we all start making those choices.
You talked earlier about kind of just got thrust into the mass media. You didn't ask for, trying to be like the face of a movement if by any means. It was just something that you had to do for you, your family, and the community that you guys were building at the gym. But what I'd ask you is, it's as time has passed and we're getting further away from kind of like that fever pitch point, in your life, what have you learned about yourself, through all of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The one thing is that, that you're capable of much more than you think you are. I've always been pretty hard on myself, and for good reason, but not in a good way. You know what I mean? I was always had this very negative mindset about myself, because again, I've made a lot of mistakes. And I told myself that like, hey, you're not a good dude. Like you're not somebody dependable. You're not somebody reliable. You're not somebody trustworthy, because I had done these things. And I learned that, that I am those things and that we all can be those things, and it's a matter of the choices that you make.
Did you have any kind of an epiphany, or was it a collection of moments, or was it one time where you're just like, I think so often people struggle with feeling enough or feeling capable, worthy, if you will. What is it, that happened with you along the way that made you feel like was it the work? Is there any kind of point where you can pin back to where, you kind of released all of that shame or released all of that negativity that you felt around yourself where, I've done all these bad things. Can I still be a good person and truly feel like that when you wake up?
There's a lot of them, actually. There's a lot of them along the way. Early on in the days of that we were opening, when we opened our doors, like we didn't know what was on the other side of that. We had brown paper on the windows because the cops knew that we were going to open, and we were in there the night before, and we opened those doors, and that parking lot was full of people. And they were like cheering for myself and my partner. They were Frank, Ian, Tillis, Jim. There were signs, there were flags waving, and there was like hundreds of people out there. And that was like, man, like, whoa, like that was just very like, it was a one of many epiphanies, and
surreal. But I want to bring up this other aspect of it, because at the same time, it's like you had these things where, you felt personally that like, I've done some things that I regret, or that, I wish I could take back. But then you have these things where you're like, no, I feel full conviction behind these moves that I'm making. But the irony of it to me is that at the same time as you had all these people in the parking lot excited for you, and fully believing in the same beliefs that you were championing at that time, there was a whole nother clan of people that were thinking of you as the worst you've ever been. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like you had this whole...
Who dug up everything I've ever done.
Yeah, you'd never had more critics of your behavior than in that moment, yet at the same moment where you felt the most clear in your conscious, Yeah,
it was in the beginning, that's something that you have to learn to navigate for sure. We were getting death threats. I mean, people were bringing up like all sorts of, we had counter protests as well. I've been spit on. And you have to learn that, first of all, you're not going to make everybody happy, and you learn to value the right people's opinions. Which is, in the age of the internet, that's very difficult for people to do.
Tough to discern.
Because the negative hurts. Like, the negative really hurts. But, I learned from certain people that the opinions of people that you've never met, first of all, don't matter, like, at all. Like, if you're not a part of my life, then your negative opinion doesn't matter at all. I don't have to put any value on the negative opinion of a stranger. I can hear it, and you will hear it. But I don't have to take that and hold that, because the reality is that person doesn't know me at all, and then you have to look at the opinions of people who do know you. Now, if the people who do know you are like, no, you're a scumbag, you should probably take a little bit of, concern to that. But you listen to the people who really know you, and who genuinely love you, as a friend, as family, whatever it is. Those are the opinions that matter, because the only people that you answer to are the people that you love and that you have that connection with. And that's very difficult, So that was another epiphany. And having talked to some people, I remember there was like a World War II vet that came to the gym. His son and his grandson came with him, and he's an old dude, man. He fought in World War II.
Not many left.
Yeah. And, he came to my partner and I, and he said, you guys are American heroes. And it was like, me? Like, and he gave us challenge coins and stuff, and this is a guy who, I don't know what theater he was in, but, he could have very well stormed the beaches of Normandy, or, he could have been in, the Pacific Islands, and these guys were, that's a hero, you know what I mean? And when somebody like that says it to you, like, dude, I had tears in my eyes. I was like, I'm not a hero, man. I'm just opening my gym. And he's like, no, man. Like, he's like, and he would tell you, he said, I'm afraid where this country's going, and I can't fight anymore, and you can, and you are, and that's why, and then another epiphany is the relationships I have today, I'm part of Summer Rejuvenation. I'm part of Recovery CBD. The only reason I'm a part of Recovery CBD is because Leo said, I want you to work with me because I trust you, because I believe in you. Like, I didn't have any buy-in to that. Like, it was just on the reputation that I had built, and those opinions mean a lot to me. And that was an epiphany when people welcomed me into something that they had built with their blood and sweat and tears and their money and their time. And they just said, just because of who you are, I want you to come be a part of what I've, what I feed my family with, so those opinions are the ones that really started to change my mindset, where it was like, man, like that means a lot. Like that really changed my own perception of myself, in times where maybe I necessarily didn't see it, or at times where I was getting a lot of negativity, you know, and those people, Andy Frisell is another one. You know, Andy reached out to me after one of the episodes on Tucker, and I didn't even really know who Andy was. And he reached out and he shot me a message, and a lot of people did, but Andy would not stop messaging. He wanted to know everything that was going on. And not only did he want to know what was going on, he wanted to know how I was. And we became best friends. Like, you know, Andy's one of my best friends in the whole world. And he, you know, here's my number, call me, you know, like, and at the end of every day, he would want to know, what's going on? Where you at? What do you need? Dude, I don't even know. I don't know. And there were times where, you know, he would be like, what's up, man? And I'd call him and I'd just be screaming into the phone, and he was just there, you know, and it's because he knew that I needed that. I don't know how he knew, but he knew that I just needed an outlet. I needed somebody to, you know, and he would say, just keep going. You'll be all right. You'll be all right. And he would promise me, I promise you, you'll be all right. I'll make sure of it. And again, at that time, I didn't even really know who Andy was, you know. And
both those guys, I mean, Leo here and Andy, they both showed up in person.
Yeah. You know,
came to New Jersey.
Leo, you know, we had an event called Veterans Outreach Workout in the middle of COVID. And it was an event that used to go on at Warhouse Gym or whatever it was for Rob and Daniel and Bailey. They used to host it, and they had moved, and you know the event wasn't there anymore. And we took it up. We said, you know what, this is a great event. Let's host it at Attilas. And we wound up sort of taking it over that year. And you know, I reached out to a lot of people, you know, and a lot of people showed support, you know, and you have like two different examples of people who really showed up. You know, when I said, hey, Andy, you know, like I'm hosting this event, you know, he was like, I'll be there, you know. And I remember like that event, it was massive. We had like, you know, I don't know, 1,000 people, more. And, you know, people kept asking me that day, like, yo, how'd you get Andy Frisell to show up? I'm like, he just offered, you know. And not only that, but everybody, the First Swarm trucks came out, staff came out, they wrote a check, you know, and then on the other end of that, just a small startup business, Leo drove all the way down from Maine, and you know, he didn't have trucks or an army of employees, but Leo showed up, and you know, not to criticize anybody else, but you know, some people came and they wanted to be a part of it because they wanted to sell some product or
right.
you know, whatever, and that's fine.
Sure,
you know,
a little more opportunistic than it was about the movement,
sure.
if you will.
But Leo came, you know, at a time where you know he's got a family to support. You know, he's in the middle of COVID. He's starting this business up, you know, and everything he sold that day he donated. You know, and like so, it's moments like that. Realize like, man, like those were all those epiphanies, and there were so many of them through people's actions.
Man, that's so cool. And I know, Leo, you had mentioned this story, you know, in that moment, you couldn't even afford T-shirts. And so it was all about the product at that point.
Yeah. And that was something I took a lot of pride in, that I was able to go down there, you know, put myself up, travel, you know, hotel, you know, work for the day, give the product away for donation, and then give everything to him. I took a lot of pride in being able to even contribute like that, you know. And to me, it was just doing what I said I was going to do. And it was really an example of, you know, how important that is, because you never know who's watching. And not only that, you never know who you're going to contrast against who doesn't do what they said they were going to do, right? So, you know, that was probably one of the things. I didn't realize how much that was solidifying our relationship, because I was just doing what I said I was going to do, which has been something I've always tried to live by. But as the longer you get into business, Jeff, you ever had people not do what they said they were going to do?
It's of course, but it's just one of those things where I would say time and time again, I don't know when it happens, but I feel like the older people get, the more easy they are to let that muscle kind of fade. You know, there was a lot of people I think that started off with really good intentions, and really, and really, you know, their word meant a lot to them. And then I don't know what excuses pop up over time, but it just feels like, honestly, the longer people are in business, and if they somehow manage to stay in business, that's their declaration that I'm doing it right. Yeah. Versus it being truly about how they act on a day-to-day basis, and, you know, literally paying their dues every day, instead of saying, you know, because of what I did 10 years ago, you know, I deserve that respect today. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think 100%. We all fall into that a little bit.
At that event, I got to see a lot of that, you know. I got to see, you know, and I won't mention any names in the other direction, but, you know, somebody like Andy. You know, like he said he was going to be there, and he showed up. You know what I mean? And that's a big name. But there were other big names that, like, you know, they barely showed up, you know, and they sort of expected it to be about them. You know what I mean? And we had, you know, this was a charity event. We raised money, and every penny of it went to, you know, 3 different veterans charities, and we raised a good bit of money. I think we raised like close to like 80,000 or more, you know, for 3 different charities.
In one day.
Yeah, we were able to cut those checks, you know. But there was people who had the resources. And not that you have to, you know, you don't have to. You know, I'm not expecting you to cut a check or whatever, but like there were people who showed up and did the bare minimum.
You should have beat me.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas, you know, somebody like Leo again, who like, that was a stretch for him. You know, that was a stretch for him. You know, that's time away from his family. That's a long drive in both directions. It's money that he really could probably use elsewhere. And there were people who had big operations and who had a lot of success in the past, and they were doing that. They were kind of riding off of like,
checking the box. If you will.
Yeah. So it was, you know, but I think that's a really cool lesson in business, is like, because the people that showed up that day are still people that I cherish. And those people also happen to be successful in what they're doing. And the people who didn't really show up, but they were there, you know, their businesses don't do quite as well. You know, a couple years out now, you know what I mean? Like they were riding on like the tail of like, you know, something that they had built, and you look now and it's like, yeah, they don't really have that, you know? And I think that's an important lesson for people. No matter how successful you are, you know, you want to stay true to your word, you know, and that's,
complacency can get anybody, but
it can.
But your word is your bond. And so, you know, I'm not kidding. I went to, you know, every kind of like networking event when I was a kid. I'm talking about just being in college and wanting to be successful in business. And I joined like you know, a little student society for business and public relations. It was called PRSSA. And I'll just never forget, I sat at like a table with like a banker, and it was just like sit with other professionals and try to get to know them and learn and whatever. I'm just like, what kind of advice would you give me? And this lady, I wish I could remember her name and thank her now, but she just said, you know what, it'll blow your mind, Jeff, but when you get to, you know, being a professional in the big world, if you will, you're going to find that most people don't follow through what they say they're going to do. And she's like, it'll blow your mind. Like if you say you're going to email somebody, email them that day. If you say you're going to call someone back, actually call them back. It's just wild how quick, you know, you can move up just from being that person that people can count on. I'm like, that seems like the bare minimum.
Yeah.
You know, and it just blows my mind.
We were having this conversation before of how many companies you work with that then try to make their product on your shelf an advertisement to move people directly to their website. And how many times does that happen in retail, where, you know, the goal of a company is to basically pillage customers back from you that are introduced to the product. And whereas, you know, I've always felt the opposite of that. I've had people that have approached me to tell me that is a strategy I should use, where I say, I'm not doing that. That's not, these relationships are more important to me than, you know, the extra money that I'm going to make from pillaging customers.
What do I do 5 years from now, whenever I've you know, exhausted all of those resources, right? It's just not a long-term play by any means. You know, you can grow fast, right, by being selfish. But if you want to go far, man, it's about how many more people can you help.
Yeah.
And, you know, you guys are great examples of that. And we really appreciate your time today. I know it's not easy traveling out this way, so thank you for taking the time to sit down with us. And, man, just wish you guys the best and hope we can continue to help you guys grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.